Hey Tim, I like that you got your banner and everything in the background. Huh? That's cool.
I'm so happy to finally be able to unveil it to people. We've been kind of keeping it under wraps for a long time now, so it feels so good to get it out and show everybody what we've been working on.
Yeah, before we get into the record though, that's a killer studio. I just did something like that at my stepdaughter's house. I painted the ceiling black and all the rafters and everything, and the lights and everything. It's so cool.
Thanks. Yeah, like I built this just before the lockdown, so it's definitely come in handy.
Yeah, no doubt. That's by your house, you say, or what?
Yeah, it's in Chicago, so it's kind of just my own studio where I can kind of do all things Rise Against and just be able to work on music and work on all the things that we work on.
Now, does it drive you crazy having a studio so close to you, or is it something that you can actually like get stuff off your chest right away?
It's actually been great. I've spent most of my time in Rise Against just working from home, just kind of in the basement, and then we do a lot of our recording elsewhere when we actually track stuff. And so I realized at one point, like I'm not a great work from home worker. like
Yeah.
I just have a hard time focusing. I have a family, I got kids, I got dogs, I got the whole rigmarole, So it's been nice to kind of be able to transition and to go into a place where now I just kind of just focus on music or just all the things that come along with what we do, like interviews like this. There's a lot of just other stuff besides the actual playing that involves doing what we do. So I guess it took me like 20 years to finally come to terms with the fact that, hey, you're a professional musician, so maybe act like it.
Now, I saw in that your manifest thing that you were doing last night that you talked about how your daughter just gets out her phone and her friends and stuff and they order stuff. How old is your daughter?
So I have a 12-year-old and a 16-year-old, both
Okay.
girls. Mhm.
So my daughter's going to be 20 this year, but yeah, nowhere generation, and these kids are living in a different generation, of course, than the ones we grew up in. And let's talk about the new record here, Nowhere Generation. Of course, that's the title track and the first single. So tell us a little bit about that. By the way, it drops on June 4th.
Yes, June 4th. This whole new album is really a way to talk about what a lot of like our kids are dealing with, talking about the generations they're growing up in, how it's different from the generation that we grew up in, and just about what it's like to wake up every day and just feel like you're swimming upstream against like an insurmountable current. And then not just talking about that, but also talk about like what are the things that are going into that current, like how are the ways that current is natural or unnatural. And that's talking about just the obstacles of the rise of the 1%, the decay of the middle class, concentrated wealth, climate change affecting our anxieties about what tomorrow is going to look like, the way we react and don't react to that. That's all the weight that people are waking up with every day. And I feel like it's so different than even the time that I grew up in. Because I feel like I grew up at a time of like relative political stability and economic stability. And so there was a point where I felt like my advice to the younger generation was becoming really dated advice. Like people don't they're no longer the idea that you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps is kind of disintegrating. The idea that you can put your nose to the grind and just work hard and there will definitely be a reward at the end of it. It's starting to become like this kind of fantasy. And so it's made me really sympathize with like our fan base, our audience, people in our front row, about what they're going through and dealing with. And I wanted to write a song that touches on like what those anxieties feel like.
Now, being in a band and stuff, do you still feel that even now in 2021, that if you put your nose to the grindstone and, well, for all intents and purposes, be a road dog, can you have success in the music business?
I think success is out there. I think it probably looks different than the way when we started like 20 years ago. And I certainly, when I think about like what's happening with this whole lockdown, I think like for some people are doing better, some people are doing worse, some people are just treading water. And then in some ways, I imagine that if this year was Rise Against 20 years ago, like if this was our first year as a band,
Mm.
I feel like it would have looked really different. Like our life would have looked really different. Like we relied on playing shows, touring, getting out there, being in people's faces, getting people's attention, eventually getting signed or making friends on the road who took us on bigger tours, who put us in front of bigger audiences. All that kind of networking is what bands do. And so I really feel for the bands that are starting out this year and the musicians that are starting out this year, because what a hard year to do it. And of course, that extends to like every other endeavor anybody is doing, whether you're starting your college career or you're opening a restaurant or you're opening a new business, all these things. Like, what a crazy time to be doing it. But I think even though everything I said was probably pretty negative, I do think that this year has also shown me what music means to people. It's really been kind of this renewal of faith in a way of like, wow, people really connect with music. Like I was resistant to doing the whole like sit in a room like this and just play guitar virtually for an audience or whatever. And when I finally did it, I was just so surprised by how many people appreciated and the extent at which they appreciated it. It was like, whoa, like I just played a few songs on a really fuzzy Wi-Fi signal on a crappy iPhone, and people around the world were like, thank you, that made my day. And it was like, whoa, like it reminds you that little things like that and music has the power to make somebody's day.
Yeah, I did that Metallica thing back in September where they had the live thing at the drive-through, right? At the drive-ins.
Yeah.
And somebody asked me, Kevin Martin from Candlebox says, yeah, I don't know if I'd be into that. He goes, how was it? I said, it was kind of cool because you were seeing Metallica, which was cool, but you were also with like-minded people that wanted to be there to see it too. And I thought that was better, actually, because you missed the interaction with the people. But you talk about that in your video for the video for Nowhere Generation is almost kind of like that. I got that kind of vibe where you guys walk up and you plug in and you start playing it. It was almost like a live stream of sorts. I mean, I know that's not what the song is about or anything like that, but it had that kind of feel to it.
Yeah, it's very much 2020. That's what it was. It was like it was walking into like a really sterile room and plugging in and playing, but knowing that people are connecting with that music in strange ways, like that Metallica show that we've never done before. I did the same thing. And I'll be honest, I was kind of a skeptic to this whole idea of like the drive-through shows and all that stuff. It just didn't seem like it was the way we should be presenting music. And I went to see one of my favorite bands, is a band called Pegboy from Chicago. And it was their 30th anniversary this year. And they had to cancel their show, obviously, but they ended up doing it at a drive-through. And I kind of went there like thinking this isn't going to be good. And you know what? It was great. Like it was really good. Like it was okay. I loved it. I was so happy that they did it. I was happy to be there. There was something that's very much of this era that those shows are. And I think that people appreciate.
Let's talk about a few other things here real fast because we're running out of time, and I just want to get your thoughts on a couple other things. By the way, like we said, Nowhere Generation drops on June 4th, the 9th album from Rise Against. What do you think of the current state of rock? I like the fact that you guys, you walk in, you plug in, and you play your instruments. What do you think of the current state of rock and music in general?
I guess I've been so in the rock and the punk world like for so long that I don't compare it to other genres of music. You know what I mean? This is just my world. This is where I'm going to be. Whether rock makes Billboard charts or doesn't make Billboard charts never really bothered me. My favorite bands were never on Billboard charts. I never saw rock as like this competitor to anything. I never saw what I do as competing anything. So I know that rock, its numbers are down and people are like really listening to a lot of pop music or hip hop and that kind of thing. But that's never really bothered me. Like it's because I never saw it as like a competition. I just saw it as like, if rock is something you listen to and you love, like it's going to be there, and I know that it is there because I know that we have a lot of our fans that are out there listening to it. And so if the smaller it is, the more of like a private party it feels like, like I grew up in the underground, I grew up in like watching underground punk bands play shows. And so I loved that feeling of like, we have something nobody knows about, this is so cool. And in some ways, like I still think I feel that way.
What about the success of your band? Could you have imagined the success of Rise Against watching those bands that you grew up watching, in the clubs in Chicago and whatnot?
Yeah, I never imagined Rise Against would snowball into what it is today. That's for damn sure.
Yeah. So I guess what I was asking about the state of rock, like not just rock, but like, kids like picking up instruments and playing, like newer bands coming up. And is there anything you see out there that's percolating under?
Oh man, like it's really cool because I was bringing in some of my guitars to a shop here in Chicago to get them fixed, and asking the guys in the shop how they were doing, and they were talking about how they couldn't keep guitars in stock like people were buying instruments, and it was incredible to hear that, because I didn't anticipate that. And it was good to know that people are picking up guitars, they're writing songs, they're not just relying on computers and laptops to make music, and it was made me realize, like, this is a timeless thing, like a good song is a song that if you had to, you could sing it around a campfire. And rock will always be that. A guitar will always be that. And some of the greatest songs that will continue to live on will be songs you can sing around a campfire. And you can't sing a song that you created on a laptop around a campfire, for all it is,
Yeah, we saw a bunch of that the other night in the Grammys, but we won't talk about that. Speaking of that, by the way, you talk about guitars and whatnot, and I know that you said, you grew up kind of like in the underground and stuff in some of the more underground bands. Did Eddie Van Halen play any influence in your life?
Yeah, I mean, Van Halen was like this, unavoidable mass, huge rock presence, on the radio and growing up. And like those skills were something any guitar player had to appreciate, because he was a virtuoso. He was somebody that kind of broke a lot of rules. And I think for me too, like I saw that a lot of my heroes looked up to like Eddie Van Halen. Like I grew up listening to like Rage Against the Machine, and I know that Tom Morello puts Eddie Van Halen on a pedestal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was like, if the people I was really loving had a lot of respect for guys like Eddie Van Halen, it made me perk up and like pay attention, because even like I grew up listening to like Fugazi and like Ian MacKaye, but Ian MacKaye loved Jimi Hendrix. Like yes, he was the singer of Minor Threat, but he loved Hendrix, so it made me like be like, oh, I got to check out Hendrix. I got to see who my influences were influenced by.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Tom, because he's pretty innovative himself. And I had a chance to share the stage with him about 2 years ago doing this This Is Your Life with Tom Morello. And it was one of the most incredible experiences.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time with Tom. We've toured solo together. Our band has opened up for Rage a couple times. I've been on the road with Prophets of Rage when they were doing stuff and joined them on some things. So it's been really cool to like just see the trail that he kind of blazed with like doing a political band that crossed over into the mainstream and then trafficked what that is, like that. And it's been great to have somebody who's already done it and been there before, and have a guy from Chicago who did it. So it's been even better.
Yeah, that's right. Well, Chicago has produced quite a bit of great music. I know it's just Billy Corgan's birthday yesterday. You friends with Billy?
I've met Billy. Yeah. Actually, I sang a song with the Pumpkins last year, or was it 2 years ago? They played the Aragon, and they did a Cars cover, and I got invited on stage to go hang out with them. And I was at a Cubs game with Billy Corgan years ago. So yeah, he's
right. That's part of the job, right?
For the job, exactly.
Yeah, no doubt. No, that's cool. What Cars song did you sing?
Oh man, what was it called? The Dangerous Type.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, like it's a lot like you.
Yeah,
Dangerous Type. That one, yeah. Which was a really cool. It's a song they've covered before, I guess, too, and it's actually like a pretty rad song. I love the Cars anyway, so.
Yeah, I've become a bigger Cars fan in the last couple of years, but it's funny you say 2 years. Yeah, the last years felt like 10 years. So I guess you probably cannot wait to get back out in front of a crowd, I'd imagine.
Yeah, this is the longest I've gone. I would say my adult life, but honestly, I've been playing shows since I was like 16. So like the longest I've gone in my memorable life that I have of not playing shows, even in high school, I was playing every weekend. And so, I've been with my wife for 20 years, and this is the longest we've been in the same town together in those 20 years. Like this is, my life has always been about either coming from the airport or heading to the airport. And so this has been a whole different pattern. And then you want to bring these songs to life. You want to go do what you do. And we're all definitely super anxious to get back out there.
Now, how long have you had these songs finished?
Some of them well over a year.
Oh, okay.
Like some of them was like by mid 2019, because we had taken a bunch of time off before the lockdown. We wrapped up our tour on our last record, Wolves, around like January or February 2019. And then we kind of stopped touring, played a couple one-offs, opened for the Misfits in LA, did Riot Fest in Chicago, but for the most part did not play much at all in 2019 and just focused on writing songs. And then into 2020, we were tracking, and right in the middle of tracking, that's when everything kind of got locked down. And we had a lot of it finished, and we finished whatever we couldn't finish, remotely. And so, yeah, we've been sitting on this record, for a while. And
So this is kind of like a pre-pandemic record is what you're saying.
A lot of it is pre-pandemic. Yeah. And I know that might even be hard to believe when you hear some of the songs, but I think what makes a lot of the songs relevant to right now is that I think Rise Against has always tried to not just sing about like the moment or what's happening right now or whoever our president happens to be. We like to sing about the ideologies behind the problems that we experience in America and the world. And those ideologies, like, they're a lot more ingrained into our system than just like this one person, this one year, this one candidate, that kind of thing. And so that's what makes, I think, a lot of Rise Against a little more timeless, is that we're not singing about the symptoms. We're singing about like the underlying causes, like the actual disease.
Yeah, you just talked about Rage Against the Machine, and would you say not that your music, but maybe the way you approach it is influenced by bands like Rage?
Yeah, well, especially when we started Rise Against, I don't think we weren't very careerist about it, and we didn't think it would snowball into what we were doing. I didn't think we'd be being played on like mainstream radio and that kind of thing, and or here talking to you. And so, especially when the band made that crossover, and all of a sudden we were doing things on a much bigger level, I took another look at Rage Against the Machine, because I realized that they were doing that stuff at that level for their whole career. I remember we got in a fight with a radio station in Florida, and we ended up canceling our performance with them. We're like, well, we're not going to go down there and play. And they were mad, and they were like, they were kind of like bad mouthing us on the air. I remember calling up Morello, and I was like, hey man, like, we took a political stance and we decided not to play the show. And now they're kind of bad mouthing us on the air and like trying to turn our fans against us. Is this something that ever happened to you guys with Rage? And he was like, are you kidding me? This happened to us every day. And I was like,
that's where I was going, yeah.
Yeah, I was like, okay, all right, cool. And it let me know, like, oh, don't blow this out of proportion, and trust your instincts and do what you're going to do, And so it's been that in that way, I've really appreciated the trail that Rage Against the Machine blazed even before we got here.
Yeah, Tom is definitely one of the nicest guys, and he really listens to people whether he agrees with them or not. And it just made news the other day, but I asked him about this a few years ago. I go, would you work with somebody like Ted Nugent? He's like, absolutely. Ted's a friend of mine, and it's like, that's how Tom is. I think he's a great guy. Yeah,
I think that we're all have a lot in common, as just people.
I think you're right.
When you really just kind of like boil it down, we all want to take care of our families, take care of each other. We want to live in a world where the most outcomes for success are possible for everybody. We want a fair and equitable place, and that's something that I think you can find in common with a lot of people.
Well, I'll tell you what, last thing here, then we'll wrap it up with you. You just mentioned opening up for the Misfits. Was that the shows at the Staples Center, the big shows a couple years ago?
In Los Angeles, yeah. It was at that big soccer stadium out there. Yeah, it was massive. It was like a 20,000 capacity arena show. It was crazy.
Yeah, that was like pretty historic, right?
Absolutely, because that was the Misfits original lineup, which hasn't happened. I think it first happened at Riot Fest in recent history, and then we did the LA show.
Was that two nights or just the one?
What's that?
Was that 2 nights or just the one?
Just the one night in LA.
Okay.
So it was cool to like be a part of that evening. It was definitely just like, it felt pretty rad to be there and to do it in Los Angeles, like the Misfits are a band that we grew up listening to and wearing their shirts. And so to like, there's just so many moments of this band where I just feel like I'm really just a kid in the front row sometimes, and so to be on that stage and to have a band like the Misfits acknowledge your existence, and give it their nod of approval, that's all you could really ask for. That's been the coolest part of doing this band, is have the people that lived only on my mixtapes, in the early 90s are like now in my cell phone and say things like, I like your band. And that's like, that's never not mind blowing, you know?
I know, both of us are lucky to live in worlds where sometimes I think to myself, what am I doing here? Why am I allowed to do this? You know what I'm saying?
That's 100% true. Yeah. It's definitely, you don't take it for granted.
Well, Tim, great to see you. Good luck on the record. Rise Against the New Record, Nowhere Generation, drops on June 4th. The first couple singles are out there right now. And it's been great talking to you, brother.
Yeah. Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for all your support. Thanks to all of our fans in the Detroit area. We love it. We love you guys. We appreciate it.